You wanted the best, but you're shit out of luck. Welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. We're here to waste some of your time and hopefully entertain you for a little bit. So thank you for letting us into your head. Hope we don't do any damage. Welcome to episode 2 of the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for spending time with us today. I'd also like to thank everyone who listened to the debut episode. That certainly exceeded all my expectations. So thank you for wasting some of your time on us. The panel today includes Alain, Sean, and Jay. So starting with Alain, why don't you guys introduce yourself to everyone watching?
Hi everyone, so my name is Alain. I'm from Belgium originally, but you may know me on the KissFAQ as Balish, the man from Japan. I lived there for 16 years. I became a Kiss fan in 1979. My first Kiss album was Dynasty, was offered on my 6th birthday. And I've been obsessed with Kiss ever since. The next thing I should talk about is my favorite album. My favorite album is Lick It Up. I think it's the most compact and the heaviest Kiss album. Dress to Kill is a close second for me. And my favorite Kiss member right now, at this stage of my life, is Gene Simmons.
Awesome. Sean, how about you?
Okay, I'm Sean from Wichita, Kansas. I'm not entirely sure when I became a Kiss fan. I got into them when I was so young that I don't really remember how I got into them or what my first album would have been. The earliest album I can remember getting that was new would probably be the Symphony album. My favorite album is Psycho Circus. I do really like that it's kind of a hodgepodge of different styles and elements from the band, which I know a lot of other people don't like, but I just really like the songs on that album. And my favorite member is Paul. I just like his songs the best.
Fantastic. Jay, how about you?
Well, my obsession with Kiss started way back in the day, 1974. Oh, and by the way, I'm music guy on the FAQ. Anyway, yeah, my brothers turned me on to Kiss in mid-74. I didn't actually own a Kiss record myself until several years later, so that first record would have been the Destroyer album. And then the obsession was completely full-blown by that point. I'd have to say probably my favorite Kiss record would be Dress to Kill, for sure. Just the production on that alone is amazing. Probably some of Peter Criss's best drum sounds I've heard on any other Kiss album. And there's just a lot of unusual sort of B-sides on that album. It's not loaded with the obvious hits, of course, except with the exception of a few of them, but Rock and Roll Night being the obvious one. My favorite member, Ace Frehley, has been since I was a kid, still is today.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you very much, guys. You know, that's, again, a good diverse group of favorite albums, favorite people, and when we all got into the band. Obviously, I'm Julian. I'm the admin at KissFAQ, and everything is my fault. So I touched on it last week in my intro. Asylum was my first album, so I'm a later day fan as well. All right, let's get into a topic today. It's a current affairs topic, really. Next Wednesday in Japan is the release of the Momoiro Clover Z and Kiss collaboration. It's going to be released in a couple of formats. The Kiss version, which includes the Japanese version of the song, a rock and roll all night version with both bands, and the English version of the song, Samurai Sun, which is obviously a Paul sung track. The Japanese version for Momoclo includes their song and I believe Rock and Roll All Night, and comes with a bonus Blu-ray DVD, which has the video, which is now out on YouTube. So if you haven't seen it, go and at least check out these girls, because it's a very unusual collaboration. And we've got so many angles that we kind of can approach this topic, from collaboration to later day Kiss recordings to the surprise. So, let's just start. Have you guys all heard this, and what did you think of it, Jay?
Actually, I finally did get around to listening to it a couple of days ago. Heard a leak of the English version of the Kiss track, Samurai Sun. Gotta say, it's always great when a new Kiss song comes out. I mean, especially this day and age, we're kind of wrapping up sort of at the tail end of their career, and I think the expectation for new music is a little lower than it probably was 10 years ago. So the excitement's there, but then on the flip side of that, this track, it's just, it's very unusual. It reminds me of a 1980s Nintendo game theme song modernized in the 2000s. It's just, it's definitely Japanese pop, no doubt about it. And I think that's probably an acquired taste for anyone who may not be cultured enough to have experienced it firsthand.
Alan, what about you? I mean, you've got a little bit more experience having lived in Japan.
It's 100% Japanese pop. I seriously doubt Paul Stanley and Greg Collins wrote that song. I think it was brought to them 100% from the Japanese side. Maybe you won't be surprised, but I kind of like it for what it is. I think it's a great Japanese pop song. And to go back to what you just said, Jay, it's that band, Momoiro Clover Z, they did a song for Pokemon a year or two ago. That's how first time I heard of them was my kids. When I first saw the news that Kiss was collaborating with that band, I said, who are they? And turns out my 10-year-old kids knew because they sang a song for a Pokemon movie a year or two ago. So that you're definitely on that angle. So yeah, I think it's selling already very well. The Japanese version is number 8 on Amazon pre-orders. I personally like the Japanese version better than the Samurai Sun Paul version. I think it's the original one, and it just sounds better in my ears anyway.
Well, I don't get Samurai Sun. That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me as a song. He's name-dropping Lexington Queen, which was a club. I think he's name-dropping some other areas. But I'm not sure what that has to do with Samurai or Bushido or anything culturally that, a gaijin's going to think of a samurai. I'm not getting any imagery.
What particularly annoys me is when he says the Ginza. Nobody says the Ginza except tourists or in tourist books. It's Ginza. Like, you don't say the Times Square, you don't say the Central Park, you just say Central Park, Times Square. So it's Ginza. The fact that he says that just, to me, ruins the whole English version.
Sean, what's your take on it?
Strangely, it's not the weirdest thing they've ever done, but I do kind of like it. I like a lot of what Tommy and Eric do on the track. One thing I notice, I'm not sure what I think about it, but during the chorus they have everyone on the background vocals singing stuff like change it and rearrange it in that part. And what I found interesting about that was that it's mixed kind of low, whereas I think traditionally with Kiss that part would be really big and loud and in your face, and in this song it's kind of quiet. Other than that, I think it's an okay song. I like how Paul sounds. I do really like the production on it. Much more so than on Monster or Sonic Boom. So I think it's an interesting song at least.
One of my comments on the board early on with this song was, I thought Paul's vocals sounded better. If we go back to Monster, there are songs on there which I felt were ruined by his vocal limitations at that time, and maybe the technology they were trying to use in the studio to mask the weaknesses. What do people think about? I mean, do you think he sounds better at this time?
Yeah, I definitely noticed that right away when I was streaming the song the other day. At the time, I wasn't sure whether that was an indication that Paul's vocal problems have maybe gotten better, improved, or whether there's just more savvy technology going on in the studio to cover that. And really, honestly, at the end of the day, it's the end product that matters. So how they go about doing that is really, I guess, kind of not terribly important as long as it sounds good. And I will say that I think Paul's voice sounded better on this track than I've noticed on the last 2 Kiss records. So I'll give him that.
Alan, what do you think?
Honestly, I think he's probably more careful the way he sings. In my ears, it didn't sound better. That's another reason why I still going for the Japanese version of the song.
How is the reception in Japan to a band like Momoiro teaming up with Kiss for this sort of thing? For me, it's a really odd collaboration. I'm more used to thinking when you take 2 different genres of music, Run DMC and Aerosmith. That's probably the king of collaborations from my experience, or who was Anthrax and Public Enemy, or maybe even Bon Jovi and what was it, Carrie Underwood, which was very safe. Is this just the weirdest collaboration? Is this like the Read My Body of collaborations?
Well, in appearance, maybe. That band, they're huge. They're absolutely the number one. When apparently it was McGee, director of marketing, who had the idea to teaming up with a Japanese pop band, they didn't choose the second fiddle. They just went for the biggest ones. And so Momoiro Clover Z is the biggest female group in Japan right now. They've tried everything. They've done a lot of very different things. I found out that they played the Ozfest in 2013, among tons of metal bands in Japan. They were there, and that takes some serious dedication to go in front of a metal audience in a festival. And apparently, the heavy metal magazine Burn, they decided to boycott the band. They didn't interview or put any pictures or review their concert at the Ozfest. They simply decided it was not for their readers. So that band, they're trying a lot of things, and things have gone very well for them. But still, to me, it was a big shock when I first heard the news, and especially the fact that they will play at the Tokyo Dome before Kiss. I think the last time Kiss had an opening band in Japan was in 1977. That also drove up the price of the tickets on the black market, because they have, of course, thousands of fans. So they're competing with Kiss fans to buy good tickets. It's Japan is the land of weird, so it shouldn't be surprising. That collaboration is par for the course, I guess.
Sean, what's your impression of them hooking up with this girl band? I mean, I guess we could have seen maybe Baby Metal, but Momoclo?
It was definitely surprising because it did just sort of come out of nowhere. I don't think anybody really heard anything about it until they made that specific announcement. And so little was known about the project when they announced it. We're still not entirely sure exactly what it is.
That's probably the amazing part. Here we are, internet era, tweets, and people rummaging through people's garbage cans. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, came this announcement that, number one, they'd been in the studio recording. Number two, that it was going to be with a Japanese band. Going back to '74, when you first became a fan, Jay, do you feel some of the magic of having the surprise?
Totally. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing. It's kind of it's a strange dichotomy, because while the mystery is gone in some respects, at the same time we have access to things that we never would have dreamed of, in 1974. So it's kind of a trade-off. I think I'd probably rather go back to the days when, you waited with bated breath for the new Rock Scene magazine or whatever to hit the stand so that you could get the latest scoop on what's going on with the band. But I'm just really surprised by how well insulated Japanese pop culture is from, I don't know if the rest of the world perhaps is the best way to put it, but certainly the U.S. I had no idea who this group was. They're a huge sensation over in Asia. clear up there on Justin Bieber level, which I hate to even mutter those words, but anyway, and I've never heard of him, and I'm pretty tapped into what's going on globally speaking with some of the huge bands and whatnot. But this band completely just flew under my radar. I don't know how that is, but it is.
But had anyone heard of Psy before Gangnam Style, became a hit out here?
True.
If you're going to go from J-pop to K-pop, it's I guess it's music. What do you expect them to do on stage? When Momoiro opens for Kiss, what do you imagine happening at that show? Do you think Kiss will, I guess, go on stage with them and do this song, or what, Sean? Any nightmare scenarios there?
I'm not really sure because I don't know a whole lot about this band. Do they play instruments, or are they more traditional pop where they dance to music that's playing in the background?
They're more the dance type.
More of a dance type? So I'm not entirely sure how exactly it would work actually playing on stage with Kiss. That I'd like to see that just to see what it would be, but I'm not sure how it would work.
Might be the first time they have a guitar on stage with them while they're singing.
Yeah.
I'm having images of Slade teaming up with New Kids on the Block right now for some reason, and all the strange collaborations that you can come up with. I don't think I can think of one that's stranger than this. So
it's definitely bizarre. Now, I did a little bit of research on the band, or if that's what you want to call them. I did a little bit of research, and apparently they're even considered in some respects a progressive pop act. I don't know if I quite hear that in the stuff that I've heard, but apparently they have a really intense live show, and they do a lot of, really complex acrobatics and things like that. So, maybe we're not giving them enough credit. I don't know.
I think it was Paul or Gene were saying, that they've got the fire on stage, they've got the, everything that goes into a Kiss show. Momoiro does similarly in the Japanese market. Not just I think they've got colors associated with the individual members as well, which is very Kiss. I don't know. Does that have any cultural significance, Alan?
Well, the very famous TV show, the Power Rangers. The Power Rangers is the American version of the original Japanese karate ninja from space type of thing, and they had five colors: the red, the yellow, the blue, the green. So that comes from there. So they're like superheroines, and they all have their colors, like those ninja from space. So that's one thing. Yes, they're a very hardworking band. What I would imagine for the opening act to be would be probably a 30-minute segment. They play a few songs, including the one with Kiss, and I would imagine, just wild guess, that Kiss would be in the form of shape of big dolls like Eddie from Iron Maiden. They would have four Kiss type dolls running around the stage. That would be my guess, because Kiss has a very elaborate production stage. It would be difficult for them to show up to do backing on one song. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
And there was something that was in my mind just now that I can't think of with this. Oh god, yeah, Power Rangers. And of course, Kiss turned down doing a song for the Power Rangers soundtrack in 1999. So,
Really?
maybe they're finally making up for that. Anything else?
I want to give credit to the video, because I think the video is very visual, and it's great that finally after 30 years of waiting, I get to see Kiss as a cartoon. I think that was a thing that when I was a kid that I dreamed. Instead of Kiss Meets the Phantom, I wanted to see a Kiss cartoon show, and the fact that they're on this video in cartoons with the Momoiro at the beginning, I think the video is extremely well done with traditional Japanese Mount Fuji from Okusai, and different writings, and they have their choreography is some kind of the sumo sumo thing. The video is really well done. It was great to see. I think it really adds to the quality of the song.
What about the album covers, or the I guess the CD single covers? Have any of you guys seen those? Sean, what's your take on? Let's go with the Kiss version first. With I think Paul's been called a little bit creepy on that.
I actually like the Kiss cover a lot. It reminds me of a lot of sort of those classic Universal movie monster posters. I think when people are talking about Paul looking creepy, they're sort of comparing him to Frankenstein's monster. And I definitely see that, but I kind of like that about it. And that's how the video portrays them as well, as these sort of larger-than-life creatures, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, kind of reminiscent of the Blockbuster greeting promo from the reunion era, with kind of the "you wanted the best" faces pose on that one.
Well, at least it's not creepy on the Folgers coffee. So it's all about perspective.
Hey, I gave up drinking coffee after that.
Oh no.
All right, so for everyone, we're throwing a little segment into each one of these podcasts that just the opportunity to play a little bit of a rare track which you may or may not have heard. I'm just going to give you 30 seconds of one today as a segue into our second topic. So here we go. All right, that's 30 seconds of an early take of Escape from the Island. If any of you remember the Novelda feature that Tim was primarily responsible for a few years ago, a chap contacted us with a reel of 8 instrumental takes, 7 of which were Ace and Eric and who else, I think it's probably Bob on bass, working out Escape from the Island. It starts with this first version, which is pretty rough, and they start tightening it up, getting much closer to what it was on the album, or at least the non-Japanese version of the album. And the final track was a previously unknown instrumental with Eric and Ace, which was really cool. I'd love to get my hands on that reel and get the full tracks, but there's just a little taste for you. Let's move into a second topic. One of the things that message boards come in for criticism about is how anyone can write anything without really attributing it properly and twisting it. We had a post on the board, I think it was last week, where the title was Paul Stanley Criticizes Eddie Kramer. And I'll just read you the quote as it was put on the board. The poster wrote, "The albums Kramer did with Kiss, apart from Alive, just sounds little and plinky, and not at all competitive with the other albums around the time. Our contemporary albums sounded better than the albums Eddie Kramer produced with Kiss." So this was from a Pat Monahan podcast. And whenever you see quotes like this, I really recommend that you go out there and listen to them for yourself, because here's the actual quote of Paul on that podcast. He said, "The studio albums, I've always had issues with the audio sonics and fidelity of them." Pat asked him, "With Eddie Kramer?" And Paul continues, "Well, not with Alive. Eddie and I have had talks where I've said that I think that those early albums were not competitive with our contemporaries at that point. They didn't sound like we sounded live. They sounded plinky and little. We never sounded like that. When you put on some of our contemporaries' albums from back then, they sounded sonically much better than us." So that's two vastly different things. That you take that first quote, the first message in the thread, and people go off on, Paul's criticizing everyone under the sun, his ego's out of control, blah, blah, blah. But let's go to the topic. Do those early albums sound little and plinky? Or You know, were the contemporary albums that much better sounding in contemporaries? Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, and God knows who else. I mean, a ton of different acts. What do you guys think?
Well, you know, I mean, I can agree maybe a little bit with the first two albums as much as I love them. You know, I mean, I think most Kiss fans would probably agree on some level that those first two Kiss records are lacking in some areas as far as sonics are concerned. You know, of course, Hotter Than Hell being the standout with so many issues with the fidelity of that recording. But, you know, I mean, I can't really think of anything that came out after that, not only with Kiss, but with the contemporaries, as it were, that was really a whole lot different. I mean, I really didn't start seeing big, huge productions in modern rock music until around Boston, really, and Foreigner and sort of the album-oriented rock. That's when I noticed the fidelity of the recordings started to really be much better than what they had been up to that point. But, you know, I mean, Stairway to Heaven maybe might be an exception in a lot of the Led Zeppelin catalog. But aside from that, I mean, I don't know. I really don't see exactly what Paul's saying.
Sean, what's your thought on the early albums? They sound good? They sound garbage?
With the first two albums specifically, I think there's a bigger problem with the tempos on the song rather than how they sound. I think either the producers or the band made a choice to slow the songs down quite a bit, and I feel like that neutered a lot of the songs. It took out a lot of their energy in comparison to their Alive versions. I think that's why a lot of people prefer Alive to those first two albums. But I would also say that Hotter Than Hell sounds less than great. I'm not a fan of that production, but I don't have a problem with how the self-titled album or how Dressed to Kill sound. I have more of an issue how the songs are presented.
Is there a difference, really, in the sound of Dressed to Kill and Love Gun? I mean, those two pretty much sound nearly identical.
Definitely the production, I would say, sound. I think those two are probably two of the better produced records. I mean, Destroyer obviously being another one of those. I'd say those three are probably, you know, sort of the pinnacle of the production end of things, at least for the original era of the band.
Destroyer almost doesn't count because it's just like the ultimate Kiss.
Right.
You know, they didn't really go back that direction until Psycho Circus in terms of tremendously produced and orchestral and, you know, just over the top. Alan, what do you make of the early albums? And I guess this is the first six, you know.
Well, I think the key thing is to compare with contemporaries, as it says, and if you listen to Love Gun between Rock and Roll Over and Alive 2, it's fine. But if you listen, for example, to the soundtrack of the movie Detroit Rock City, which had a lot of, or even if you watch the movie, you know, with Tin Lizzy, Jailbreak, Blue Oyster Cult songs, and then you hear Shout It Out Loud, or you hear I Stole Your Love. It's true. There's a drop in sound. It said, you have a Kiss song, and then you have all the rest of the 70s songs. I feel it. I've always thought Love Gun sounded strange for some reason. I don't have the technical vocabulary to explain. But if you hear Running with the Devil, Van Halen, 77, 78, and then you hear I Stole Your Love or Shock Me, and then you hear Tin Lizzy, and I hear a drop in sound quality somehow.
And that's really noticeable. But in the transition on the first two albums, Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise do two albums, two vastly different sounding albums. And I said last week that, yeah, sure, some of the blame maybe is on Ace for his experimental cardboard box bass or whatever that amp was. But that didn't sound right. And I think of the early albums, the best sounding one, the one that captures everything that they'd been trying to capture, is Rock and Roll Over. And maybe it's because it's recorded live in a theater, with the overdubs later. And the first album, I think the first album nails it. Sure, it could do with a little bit of tweaking. Which one of those first 6 albums do you think best represents the so-called Kiss sound?
I guess, maybe in hindsight, now looking back, I would say probably Rock and Roll Over would be sort of maybe more representative of the classic Kiss sound that you would expect. And I'd put it up there as far as production is concerned. I actually really like the sound of it. One thing that I really like about it is it's got the edge that Kiss had early in those first 2 records as far as the guitar tones are concerned. But at the same time, there's just enough gloss to make it palatable. So it's almost like a distillation of Destroyer meets maybe Dress to Kill with maybe a little more guitar, edgy guitar tones. So I like it. I would say Rock and Roll probably is maybe the truest to the sound that most people identify with Kiss.
Sean?
For me, it would definitely be Destroyer. That's the one that sounds the biggest and the loudest, and just the one that I respond to the most.
God, and some of the material on there, I mean, Flaming Youth will always be one of my favorite songs.
Sometimes it is hard to sort of separate the songs that you like and how they sound. Do you think that sometimes colors how you look, how certain albums sound? Like, I may like the look of production better than Dress to Kill simply because it has songs like I Stole Your Love and Shock Me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think any of us, think, oh, Love Gun. I automatically think I Stole Your Love, favorite song on the album. Alan, what about you?
I'm a partisan of less is more. I think Dress to Kill, to me, is, there was a lot of issues about production. They did it really fast. Neil Bogart wasn't there, apparently, but it just sounds great. It's the closest to Alive, I think. It's raw, it's rough, it's basic, and it just still now I think it sounds great.
So it's almost that almost makes it a self-produced album.
Yes, yeah, and yeah. I think they did really well.
So what they basically learned from Kerner and Wise and Ron Johnson,
what not to do.
That's true. Yeah, Dress to Kill, while I will concede your comment about Rock and Roll being maybe the most Kiss-like in terms of sound, got to go with Alain as well, because Dress to Kill to me is just, I think it's the perfect Kiss record. As far as production, maybe it's a little weak on the songs in places, but that's almost the charm for me for that record, is that, I think there's a good reason why Kiss went out on that Kiss cruise. Last 2 years now, they've done practically the entire Dress to Kill album in its entirety. Those songs are classics, even though they may not necessarily be mainstream. I love them. I love the album.
That's a good point.
And that might be a really cool way to beef up Kiss Cruise 5, that if they're saying that it's going to be Cruise Alive, well, inject into it all that material that was performed on the Dress to Kill tour that didn't make it onto the Alive album. What were they also performing back then? Strange Ways, Of Hotter Than Hell, Mainline. They can really beef up that. There's criticism of, you're going to pay to go on a cruise and get Alive, when they did that in 2008. But do you think Rock and Roll Over would make a good core for a performance?
Yeah. I think that actually would be great. I would love to hear, I'd love to hear Baby Driver. I know that song catches a lot of heat on the FAQ, but
I hate it.
I freaking love it. To me, and I'm not even a huge Peter Criss fan, but that song, to me, that's the perfect Peter Criss song. And I know that's probably setting the bar low for some Kiss fans, but I think Baby Driver is a fantastic song. It's probably my favorite song on the Rock and Roll Over album, and I would shit myself if I heard that song live. That would be amazing.
Do you think Eric could pull it off vocally?
No, I think his voice is a little too thin and reedy. That's always been my complaint about Eric's voice. I think he's better off as a backing vocalist, which I think he's great at. But I've never been impressed with any of his lead vocals, both on the live front end, even in the studio.
All right, so of those early albums, then let's go back to that quote of which one sounds the most Little and Plinky to you. What's the worst album of the originals in terms of production?
The first one, I would say.
You gonna go with that over Hotter Than Hell, or does the material color our opinions here?
Yes, I think it does. Yeah, I Hotter Than Hell. It's difficult to not to hear how bad it sounds.
Yeah, I
changed my mind. Hotter Than Hell.
I kind of agree with you too, as well. I mean, I love Hotter Than Hell, and I love that swampy, sludgy kind of sound. I don't know if I would necessarily call it Little and Plinky, but I would definitely say that it's probably. I mean, I think everyone would agree it's the weakest production, but there's just I don't know. I think that maybe I'd have to say the first album actually would probably be the Little and Plinky that Paul's talking about, because the guitar tones there aren't quite as massive as they are on Hotter Than Hell.
Sean?
My least favorite production-wise would be Hotter Than Hell. I just don't like the way it sounds, and I think it kills a lot of the songs. But there are certain songs on the record that I do think the production fits very well, mainly the Gene material and Ace's material. I think Parasite sounds really, really good. I like how Watching You sounds. But I think a lot of Paul's songs really, really suffer from the production.
So Little and Plinky, I immediately thought W or Dress to Kill. Dress to Kill, I just find that it's just so flat, and I don't know whether it's because there's not a whole bunch of screaming lead guitar. I mean, I miss a lot of the solos, which are kind of lacking on that album. It doesn't have, it's so concise, so edited. You've got a 3-minute song that surely could have been, or not even 3 minutes, because didn't they make the gaps between the tracks on the LP longer to make it feel like a longer record? I mean,
yeah.
Or I guess that must be true since I read it on the internet. It just sounds like it's struggling for a bit of duration. A 2-minute and 23-second track, the Ramones would be proud of how short the Kiss songs are on that album. So right I've got issues with the material on that album, let alone the sounds. I mean, it's like the unrealized rush that it probably was to get your butts back in the studio. We're sinking here. We got to have product to sell. I'm going to produce it for you when I'm not away partaking in extracurricular activities. I mean, so Little and Plinky, yeah, I think I'm going to have to nail that one on Dress to Kill.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well, I agree. I mean, the guitar tones on that record are I mean, especially Paul's guitar. I'm assuming that's Paul because it's most of the rhythm tracks I'm really hearing. The Plinky that you're kind of referring to, because the guitars are a little thin on that record. I think that makes the album maybe a little snappier, than a little peppier, and maybe I like the concise thing about Dress to Kill. I like the fact that it's in and out and over before you even really are able to sink it in. I like that about it. But as far as Plinky, I could see that with the guitar tones on Dress to Kill. But man, the drums, that's just so hard to overlook. Those are freaking awesome.
Could have been a great album, I think, with a bit more work. Needs more cowbell.
Definitely needs more cowbell.
Sean, thoughts?
Something I was just wondering, because you mentioned guitar solos. Why doesn't Ace have a solo on Rock and Roll All Night on that studio version? Has anyone ever said a reason, or?
He was out at a card game, and Dick Wagner wasn't available.
That's right.
I don't know if anyone's ever asked him. I always thought it was just time limitations. That album was recorded so fast. I mean, they'd started it in L.A. while they were wrapping up the end of the tour. I mean, what was it? One of those, I think, demos. That group of 4 demos were all cut out in L.A. when they're out there. So straight back to New York, and they're recording it, and then they're back on the road by March. So that was a lot of rush. I'd love to hear better quality of those demos from that album.
Yeah, as far as Rock and Roll Night is concerned, I think that song, and I could be wrong because I'm not 100% sure on where I heard this, but my understanding was Rock and Roll Night almost from the get-go. I know Paul and Gina both said that song was assembled really with the intention of it being a single. They needed a rallying cry for the troops, as it were, and so maybe with Bogart being a singles man, especially back in the bubblegum era, a few years preceding, there weren't solos in those songs. Those songs were very concise, barely even 3 minutes. So it makes me wonder if maybe the reason there was never a solo in that song was just, let's get in, let's crank out that repetitive chorus as many times as we can to hook people in and then get out. So maybe a guitar solo was maybe that was an ill-advised thing, but maybe it was intentional. I don't know.
So being a fan in '74, do you remember Kissin' Time coming out as a single, talking about single father and Neil Bogart?
Yeah, no, I don't. I was 6 years old in 1974, so my recollections of that first tour, I actually saw Kiss in late '74 in Indiana with my brothers. And I don't have a whole lot of recollection of it. I do have some foggy recollections. But my memories with Kiss, as far as, I guess, my childhood memories, really kind of started more in mid-'75. That's when the story starts to, I can flash back to that period of time and remember, what was going on with Kiss. 'Cause being from Indiana, which is where I'm originally from, was close to Terre Haute, not very far. Terre Haute's only, 35, 40 miles from my hometown. So, I was very, very aware of what was going on with the Kiss Army thing as it started to happen. So that's really when my memories of Kiss are firm.
That's awesome. I mean, fan from the first album, I'm jealous. 1974, I was 3 years old, and, we were still living in England. So God knows what I was listening to, because the earliest music I remember was Boney M. God awful.
Boney M.
Yeah, Rah Rah Rasputin, lover of the Russian Queen. So.
Yeah, but you guys had Sweet, you had Slade. I mean, I'll tell you what, I'm an Anglophile all the way, so I'm kind of, with Gene and Paul, a lot of my influences and most prominent memories are British rock, not even American rock. Kiss being really the sole exception.
Yeah, I had an aunt who listened to Slade, but none of that was really played around us. I mean, in that phase, she had gone from Slade, and I think she was listening to Jimmy Osmond, as the earliest music again. So Anglophile music is great, but I think it's probably makes more of an impression on those in America. Kind of like, the only music I remember being played, Osmonds, my parents, Beatles, because Liverpool connection. Damn, but you get Kiss. You get Kiss '74. I get Kiss 1985. So.
Well, I remember Kiss they were sort of like Marilyn Manson in their day, as far as they were kind of they were beneath most of the critics at that point, which Kiss has never been a critics band anyway, but I think at some point critics finally just surrendered and said, screw it, they're not going anywhere, we might as well at least acknowledge their existence. But those first 3 years of the band's existence, really up through Destroyer, they were nobodies, at least in my area of the country. They were nobodies, and the people that did know them, that weren't diehard fans like myself, hated them. I mean, they thought they were dirty, repugnant, vile lowlifes. So, they didn't really become sort of a kiddie band until around the solo albums, when Phantom of the Park came out. That, to me, is when I really noticed the image sort of being watered down.
But Sean, you're even well, I guess you're younger. You're into the band even later than us. How does that happen for you?
I think a lot of my musical taste and my taste in pop culture in general really comes from my parents. My mom was born in the late 50s and my dad in the mid 60s, so they grew up with a lot of the rock from the 60s and 70s. And so that's just what they listened to, and I think I was just around that style of music a lot, and probably how I discovered Kiss. My mom was probably a bigger Kiss fan than my father was. My dad always liked more jazz or blues-based rock, while my mom was a bit more into what came out of the 70s and then the 80s with hair metal.
Yeah. So what was the music around your place growing up that you kind of remember being the music that got you aware of music, I guess, for want of a better term?
The only music that I really listened to as a really young kid was Kiss. I wasn't really consciously aware of a lot of other music, unless it was like in a movie or something. Like I knew Will Smith music because he put his music in his movies.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I hit puberty and went to junior high that I started to really pay attention to what people I went to school with were listening to, as well as what my parents liked. I started watching VH1 Classic and the stuff that they show, started getting exposure to music videos. And I think visually is how I got introduced to a lot of bands, because my mom has a lot of those home videos that were a big trend in the 80s and 90s. That Kiss did a few, like Extreme Close-Up, and she has several Aerosmith ones and a couple Motley Crue ones. So I think visually I was always attracted to a lot of the bands from the 70s and 80s.
Well, Motley Crue is Kiss, isn't it?
There are definitely similarities.
Or maybe, no, wait, Wasp was Kiss.
Yeah, I remember in the 80s when I first stumbled upon Wasp and Motley Crue, which is probably around the same time. That to me was as close as you could get to Kiss. And, it just so happened that Kiss took off their makeup, and sort of that theatric end of the bands kind of came to an end at that point. So those guys came in at really the perfect time. They sort of, carried the flag, while Kiss was off doing more of the vanilla stuff, which I don't mean in a necessarily a negative way, but their image and their live performances weren't quite as elaborate as they were back in the makeup days. So Wasp, yeah, they were a big deal to me when they came out back in the day.
New album this year from Blackie. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm waiting. I've been hearing about it for 6 months, 7 months now, and I haven't seen a bit of press about it, so I'm starting to get a little worried.
So let's wrap up here. I'm going to put you both on the spot. I didn't post this question as a possible question. We've started out talking about Kiss and a collaboration. If you had to pick a musical collaboration out there, that's happened before, what would be your favorite musical collaboration? And second part with, if you could pick someone for Kiss to collaborate with on a project, who would it be? Sean, let's put you on the spot.
My favorite musical collaboration that's happened. It's hard for me not to go with the Aerosmith Run DMC one, simply because that's something I wouldn't really expect to work, but I actually like that version of the song better than the original one from Toys in the Attic. I just think that collaboration just worked really, really well. In terms of what I'd like to see Kiss do, it's hard to say. I'd be interested to see what they would come up with working with Alice Cooper, because I know Alice, particularly in the 80s, started doing a lot of collaborations with a lot of different people from other bands. And I think that would be interesting just because they are somewhat similar, and I'd be curious to see how Paul and Gene as songwriters would work with Alice.
Yeah, what was it? Trash or whatever the second really big album had just about everyone under John Bon Jovi. He nicked the song from Zodiac Mind Warp as well. I mean, Mick Mars was on guitar on one track. I mean,
Tyler.
Yeah, I mean that I couldn't stand the album, but it sure had everyone under the sun on it. Good call on Run DMC as well. That was a game changer in '86. It certainly did a lot for Aerosmith's career. Jay, what about you?
I've been sitting here thinking while we've been talking about past collaborations, and I got to say, nothing really springs to mind. I mean, I'm certainly aware of plenty of different collaborations, but I don't know. There's something about collaborations, maybe just the idea of that doesn't appeal to me. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just not adventurous enough. But so having said that, I can't really think of anybody. The one person that I thought would be amazing as a collaboration, potentially with Kiss, would have been Alice Cooper. So I echo your statement, Sean, because I do think that both of them have such strong identities, both visually and conceptually, that the two of them together would be kind of an interesting, collaboration. I mean, I would be curious to see how it would turn out. Maybe a Kiss Black Sabbath collaboration would be kind of cool, but they're so stylistically different. I really don't even know what that would sound like. So that's the best I got, man.
See, putting Kiss and Alice Cooper together is kind of like Momoiro. They both got very visual stage shows. And I was watching some of the Japanese girls stuff just to try and get my head around what they were as a band. But what could Kiss and Alice do that they haven't both kind of done? As a niche. If I've got to pick the one collaboration, I'm going with Anthrax and Public Enemy, because that was just the one that really drew my attention to rap, more so than the Aerosmith one. Into a whole different sort of, the Public Enemy type of rap as it started getting a little bit more edgy. And Anthrax, who I despise, just a band I do not care for. It was probably one of the few bits of music of theirs other than I'm the Man that I can take. So that'll be the one for me. As far as Kiss working with anyone, I don't see any point. Maybe they can collaborate with Vinnie Vincent.
Now that would be a good idea. I mean, they've never really, so far, never had any bad collaborations with Vinnie Vincent. I mean, you got pretty much the entire Lick It Up album, half of Creatures of the Night, and a couple songs on Revenge. So no complaints there. You can find him.
But as an active act, he doesn't count because he's one of the disappeared.
That's true.
Modern musicians, who would they do well with? I don't know. Probably the Kardashians. They could do Kardashian family album with Kiss as the backing group.
Well, what's his name from Slipknot? I always forget his name.
No, Joey Jordison?
Yeah. I could, maybe Slipknot would be kind of an interesting thing, because he is a huge, he's a huge fan of all the bands from the 70s, an acknowledged Kiss fan. So maybe something like that would be kind of interesting.
Or Rob Zombie, if we've mentioned Alice Cooper, who's the successor to Alice Cooper. Really, it's kind of Rob.
Yeah, just keep Rob off the mic. Just have him in production and write.
All right, guys, we're approaching an hour. Want to wrap it up. Alan, you dropped off, so we'll have to get your picks in a thread on the topic. Any final words, guys, for the board, for the world?
I'll see y'all on the FAQ. Thanks for inviting me, Julian. I appreciate it. And Sean, good meeting you, brother. And I'll say hello to Alan when I get back to the forum.
Sean.
Be good.
Thanks for letting me be a part of this. It was really fun.
And everyone on the FAQ board and elsewhere, whether you drink red, blue, purple, or green Kool-Aid, you're all welcome. So come on over and let's have a debate. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and thank you, participants, for joining me today.
Thanks.
See you guys next time.
Have a good one.